special meeting, because it is special, it is out of sequence, Wednesday, May 21st, 2014, for the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority, City of Crescent City, County of Del Norte. And at this time, let us do a Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Wilson, would you please lead us? At this time, we'll open up for public comments. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from the chair, please state your name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. So do we have anybody who wishes to address our group on? Now, Mr. Jacobs, I know you're on the agenda, and that's 7.6, so I'm going to ask you to hold your comments then, if that's what you, unless there's another matter other than the recycling of oil issue. Okay, any other comments from our audience and public comments at this time? All right, having seen no one here, ready we'll close public comments. Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force, no items to report. And we will now move on to the consent agenda. And we'll open it up for the public to comment on consent agenda items at this time. Is there anybody from the public who would like to address consent agenda items 2.1 to 2.7? Seeing and hearing no comments from the public, we'll close public comments. We'll come back to the board. Any board comments on consent agenda items? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 2.1 to 2.7.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda items 2.1 through 2.7.
Commissioner Gastineau, motion, and Commissioner Wilson seconds. Okay, well, let's poll the vote then. Karen?
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, now moving on to Director and Treasurer's reports, agenda items 3.1 through 3.5. The Acting Director's report, 3.1. Ted?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Gitlin. So again, summarizing those things that are all written in the Director's report, which of course I presume that you've all read, but I'll highlight the things that are not covered elsewhere on the agenda. So on the 18th of April, I did participate in a conference call with Spencer Fine and Terry Brennan of Cal Recycle, and that is in part a lead up to a site visit that's coming from Spencer on May 29th.
In regards to that meeting, can you please explain a little bit about the possible redesignation of recycling market development zones?
Yes.
What that means?
Sure. The Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority has partnered with the Humboldt Waste Management Authority to form the North Coast Recycling Market Development Zone. And so we are part of that entity, and that historically Cal Recycle, or its predecessor, the California Integrated Waste Management Board, have used these zones as a way to promote recycling market development, essentially businesses using recycled materials. And they promote this in two ways, one offering technical assistance, and the second offering low-interest loans. Low-interest loans have been less attractive during the last few years because the interest rates have generally been fairly low, and as a state-run program, there are additional hoops that one has to jump through to access this state funding. And our challenge has been that while our zone coordinator, we've shared the expenses with to receive services from Maureen Hart, who was the coordinator of the North Coast Recycling Market Development Zone. We've had fewer resources to devote to that in past years, and so most of our time has been spent down in Humboldt. So we haven't really had much tangible result recently from the Recycling Market Development Zone, and that the state agency, Cal Recycle, is looking at changing the way they're going about designating those zones and the services that are associated with them. So that will be included in part of the discussion when Spencer comes up.
And are there any financial benefits to this organization regarding that, or are there any extra reports or anything that need to be done? So if we are involved with Humboldt in this particular agency, regional agency, what are the requirements? Are there costs, or are there income from that?
The costs, there were some staff costs in terms of the application to become designated as a recycling market development zone, and that was several years ago. So there haven't been any ongoing costs as the last few years. I'd have to look back at the records, but I think it's been a couple years now since we contributed to paying Maureen Hart anything, because we haven't received any real tangible service through this program. But the real benefits are not necessarily so much to the agency as to recycling-based businesses. So at various times, for instance, I have tried to work with Hambro Waste Solutions Group as they were looking at their eco-store about ways that they might be able to tap into these funds. I've also discussed it with Drew Linder Recycling, but we haven't found a fit yet, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners' comments on the acting director's report?
Oh, I'm not quite done. That was
I'm sorry,
just that
go ahead.
item. Sorry about that.
My apologies.
I met with Bill Patterson of the Yurok tribe to assist in planning for the Klamath River cleanup. I provided technical assistance to Atlas Auto as they were renewing their status as a certified used oil recycling center down in Klamath. I coordinated the inspections of the scales at the Delaware County Transfer Station with the Delaware County Department of Weights and Measures. And coincidentally, we were able to discover that our scales were in need of calibration, and fortunately, Powell Scales was actually in the county, so we were able to split some of that service charge with Tidewater, but we'll be seeing an invoice for that coming up. I did discuss with Joel Wallen preparations for maintenance painting of the Authority Administrative Office sometime this summer, and I did give a composting workshop at the Conscious Living Expo, and we had somewhere between 12 and 14 participants. Upcoming in the month ahead, like I said, we will be having a meeting with Spencer Fine of Cal Recycle. I still have not had time to get to the analysis of the small volume transfer stations in Klamath and Gasky to inspect the certified oil centers as required under our grant program. In the coming month, I will plan on presenting the draft authority budget, which I hope will be adopted at this meeting, to the City Council and Board of Supervisors, and to receive written comments and include those with the agenda for the June 11th meeting. And I hope to coordinate with the County Auditor's Office regarding the list of bad checks to be addressed before the end of this fiscal year.
Are you going to stay with the same color,
I'm sorry?
the paint you're painting?
Do you have any advice in that regard?
Well, I just was curious if, I noticed that it attracts a lot of spiders out there, so I don't know, something
Fair
a little
enough.
bit lighter would be nice.
And yeah, as, not to be sexist, but as a guy, I'm somewhat challenged in terms of color, and so I would welcome advice.
Yeah, I think a lighter color would be nice, and I'm happy that it's being painted. I think what an 8-year cycle, it just prevents the long-term maintenance issues and extra expense by keeping up with the painting, so I'm happy about that.
Commissioners, any additional comments on the...
Just more of a question on this. I'm just curious as to why there's a couple things listed in here, like printed agenda, and I'm not sure why that's extraordinary to your work activity. And I guess I conducted a fire drill at the Delaware County Transfer Station. I would anticipate a little shorter, briefer activities summation, and I'd like actually to have some time attached to these too. How much time is actually dedicated to receiving comments on the budget? How much time did that take to receive the comment? I'm confused, I guess, on your reports, because I read through some of this stuff and I don't know exactly how much time is dedicated to that or how much time it took to get that.
And oftentimes that it's a moving target. For instance, the comments, I have not yet received any comments from the City Council or the Board of Supervisors, and depending upon what those comments are, it might take different amounts of time to address. Regarding the detailed comments about the fire drill, I appreciate that that may appear somewhat tedious, but there has been ongoing discussion about what it is that the director and the program manager do. And so I do feel somewhat obliged to let you know the kinds of things that we do. And I need to let you know that this is not in any way a comprehensive list. This is
Okay,
just-
well, if you're going to do that, I'd like actually a request on the next one to attach a time spent on these, on each of the items here. Just so we're aware, if you're going to give us your full details, I want to know what kind of time you're spending on them. Printing and submitting the agenda, that, I'm surprised it's actually listed on our agenda as a report, so.
And the reason why that was included is that the original meeting was scheduled for May 1st, and then it was rescheduled for May 8th. And so,
And that happens with all kinds of committees, so this is not an extraordinary situation. The Board of Supervisors had a lot of special sessions and extra meetings, as well as transportation meeting, we're having one Thursday. So,
yes, and part of this communication is intended to underscore that the Board of Supervisors does have clerical staff to assist with this, and at this point in time, the only clerical staff I have in tangible support is Karen, who I really appreciate taking minutes at the meetings, and some limited staff in terms of copying and preparing the agendas, but in terms of writing the reports and doing the analysis, that is really solely my responsibility.
Sure, no, I understand that. I would just, and I don't know how the other commissioners feel, but I'd like a time spent on the items on the, not on this one, but on the next meeting, just so how much time you're having to dedicate to this.
I see where you're going with this, Commissioner Sullivan. I think we all want the acting director to utilize his time in the most productive way possible, and if these are clerical functions you're involved in, perhaps you can delegate, if that, where possible.
If you care to go through this agenda and make any suggestions about any of the items we're discussing that could be delegated, I would be very open to that.
Well, we've said this before, that if you need additional clerical help, and we said that before.
And what I need is really not so much clerical help, but technical help. Technical analysis help, program manager and a director.
But if at any time, Ted, you feel you need additional clerical help to make copies of things on a part-time basis, I hope you'd come to this board and ask for that help, and I'm sure this board would be very receptive to freeing you up to spend your very trying schedule in a way which is as productive as possible. Any other board comments at this point?
I just,
oh, Mr. Steve,
go ahead, you started.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that as far as
Commissioner Howard.
tracking these things and giving us the amount of time necessary for each is just yet another expectation that we would lay on Ted in an already trying schedule. And it doesn't seem like a good use of time at this point to analyze that to that detail, in my opinion.
Commissioner Wilson?
Well, I was just going to comment that for staff that I have, that I actually ask them to write out their time when they're doing things, so I have an idea of what they're spending their time on, you know, because I'm paying for it. Because I can't watch my maintenance person all the time. I don't know what he's doing. And it is kind of a little small thing. Sometimes I'll spend a couple hours on. Sometimes when it starts to get really expensive, then I'll say, hey, you know, we spent a lot of time on this. Maybe we should, you know, reevaluate what we're doing and do something else. So I actually do use that as a tool because some things that I think won't take that much time end up taking a lot more time and a lot more expense. So and I think it's pretty simple. I mean, he does it. I think he does it all. He just logs it a bit, so I know what's been done. If you know what's gotten painted, if he took an hour doing something, or if he took 3 days and did it, then I have a good idea of the scale of the work that was done. So I think it's a good idea. Always a good idea. Personally, it's just it's an extra tool. I don't think it would take that much more time. But anyway.
All right, your points are well taken. Commissioner Gastineau, any comments at this? Okay, then we'll move on to 3.2, the Treasurer Controller Report. Mr. Taylor, if you wouldn't mind coming up and giving us a status of the bank account, and if you can address, I'll come back to you, Ted, on 3.3, but if you can, Mr. Taylor, also talk about the claims approved by Treasurer and Director for April 2014. If you can address that also.
Sure. Well, the Treasurer's Report, which is done by the County Auditor, we have $456,899.81, and we also have an iBank loan deposit of $188,177.17. And through the first 9 months, we have an excess of revenues over expenditures of $117,566.06. And claims approved by the director. You want Ted to go through that? You want me to go
Yeah, just stand up there. Ted, if you wouldn't mind, please, on 3.3, because you're here also as treasurer, Mr. Taylor, so I just wanted to make sure that we're getting all the facts presented to the public. Ted, 3.3, claims approved by...
Sure. Just taking off some of the big items, the $6,000 payment to the Environmental Services JPA was a delayed payment that was approved by the board months ago, and unfortunately we dropped the ball, but we did pick up that it had not yet been paid, so we tried to pay that as soon as we noticed that. There are a couple claims there from our legal counsel, which we very much appreciate. The standard payment to Hambro Waste Solutions Group for their services at the transfer station, and then some additional expenses related to landfill water testing, both for North Coast Labs and for County Community Development Department.
Commissioners, any comments? Move on. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, again, I'd called Ted about this earlier, about the $6,000 payment to the RCRC, because I was confused. It seemed not that long ago that we had discussed this, and making the payment, and then I just saw it this time on the claims for this month. And we did discuss it back at the end of summer in our August meeting, and so then it's, right now, it's on this.
So it's I think it's payment for this fiscal year ending.
So it is.
And then this
I
upcoming one,
did
we
double
won't
check
have
that it was not a double payment, but it has been about 8-9 months since we approved it that it was, it's on here. So anyway, it was confusing because it wasn't quite an issue at that time, but it is for 2013-14, and it expires at the end of the year, and then it's not in the next budget to go, after we had, it's not in the next budget. That was my comment.
Okay. 3.4, monthly cash and charge reports for April 2014. Ted?
Well, there in front of you, just to let you know, we are aware of some of the larger outstanding balances, and I have had a conversation both with Hemmingson Contracting and the ongoing Redwood National and State Parks issue is related to their electronic payment program. We hope to have that resolved, but again, the illness issues among our accounting staff have impacted that progress. Red Sky Roofing, I left a message for, and all other accounts are largely current. Be happy to answer questions.
Seawood Village?
Seawood Village, let's see. Yeah, it was a single month, and they're generally pretty good at paying. And as you can see, they don't have any outstanding balances.
Okay. What is current, excuse me? Big bill.
All right.
But
Okay, good.
we do try to work, like Hemmingson Construction, when our customers have big months, that's good news for everybody. So we try to work with them to try to make sure that our cash flow works, and theirs does as well.
Okay, we'll move right along unless there's any additional comments by commissioners. We'll move on to 3.5, earned revenue comparisons for year 12-13 and 13-14.
Yeah, generally, in terms of the revenue projections and the revenue comparisons, we're pretty close to projections. We're about $5,000 short, adding both the franchise fees and the transfer station fees together. But as you can see, just for this last month, the transfer station income in April was over $7,000 above the projections. So since we have 2 months left in the fiscal year, I'd say our projections are pretty spot on.
Commissioners, any comments on the report from the director or the treasurer on
So the difference then right now is what?
3.5?
It's about $5,000 total. It's $2,776 on franchise fees that were short from projections, and on the transfer station income at this point in time, we're $2,264 short of projections, but generally, May and June are some of the busier months of the year. So like I said, I think our projections
But you
are on
had
track.
reduced the budget by approximately $26,000 estimated income for next year. Did you readjust since we're catching up a bit now, or?
I have not yet readjusted that. My thought was we could start conservatively, and if the money was coming in as we were hoping it would, then we could adjust accordingly.
Okay, because we had reduced the budget for next year by $26,000 because it looked as if the projections were falling behind the prior year. And with this report from this month, it looks as if now with better weather and everything that we're catching up, so we won't be $26,000 less than we were the prior year, hopefully. And that, so I just was wondering if it would be prudent to adjust the budget or just.
I really appreciate the suggestion, and I very much considered doing that, but just as all projections are, based, that they're as good as you can make at the point that you make them. I noticed both that our projections for income appeared to be a little more conservative than needed to be, but also the projected expenses associated with the constituent of concern monitoring appear to be coming in higher than I originally included in the budget, so those may offset each other.
Understood, thank you.
All right, we'll conclude Director and Treasurer's Report 3.5 and close that off at this time. Mr. Jacobs, I see you're in the audience. Do you have any problem on time frame? We can take this item out of sequence, or you're right in just going on the agenda? Very good. Okay, we'll move on to discussion action items on landfill post-closure. 4.1, receive and file letter from Susan Markey of the California Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery, that's Cal Recycle, regarding approval of the reduction of post-closure maintenance financial assurance multiplier for the Crescent City landfill. Ted?
This is good news in terms of our finances. While it doesn't make a direct difference in terms of our overall cash, it absolutely makes a difference in terms of our overall assessed liabilities, because this is essentially how, in our audit, the liability associated with the Crescent City landfill is recorded. Under state law, typically, one takes the annual post-closure maintenance cost projection and multiplies that times 30, meaning you have 30 years of the post-closure period that you need to take care of. Now, it may seem a little counterintuitive, but the way the law reads is that once you're in the post-closure maintenance period, say you've gone through 5 years of it, now you've got 25 years left, your post-closure maintenance expense is not 25 times the annual maintenance expense, it's still 30 times the annual maintenance expense unless you apply to have that multiplier reduced. So that's what we did. We applied to have the multiplier reduced as we have done in previous years. And so this letter is approving a reduction in that multiplier from 24, which was what it was previously approved to be, to 23. That makes this letter worth $99,133, because without this approval, our projected liability for the landfill at this point in time would be $2,379,201, and with this approval, it is $2,280,068, meaning a difference of $99,133. And total, compared to what it would be if we didn't apply for these things, a 30-year calculation would have a liability, an additional liability of $693,933. So essentially, this work that we've done has reduced our liabilities by nearly $700,000.
Very good. And I did notice also that the prior board has put forward that this is applied for on an annual basis, correct?
Correct.
So it's such a good idea that we should keep doing this and hopefully keep going down.
I have a question, Ted. On this, it's reduced from 24 to 23, which is a savings of about $100,000. Is the anticipation that we're going to continue this practice, going to realize a similar reduction in liability, 22 years, 21, et cetera? Is that the whole mindset of applying?
That is the plan.
Having these multipliers reduced?
Yes.
So if we are successful next year, what can we anticipate on a reduction of liability? A similar amount?
Probably a similar amount. It has to do with what the inflation rate is also, so it's not a fixed amount that it changes each year.
I believe that was the policy of the board last year, is to reapply every year. So unless the board gives different direction, I think that's the direction of staff.
Keep it up. Good work. Thank you. Moving on to, there's no action item here. 4.2, discussion and possible action regarding pledge of revenue for financial assurances for post-closure maintenance and potential corrective action relating to the Crescent City landfill and Resolution 2014-02A. And Ted, if you would.
Yeah,
please.
this is, we're revisiting this in that we had the board had previously adopted a version of this pledge of revenue agreement that had signature lines for the city, as well as the county, as well as the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. The city, considering whether or not to put this on their agenda, asserted correctly that the prior pledge of revenue agreement did not include any city signature lines, and so they were disinclined to adopt a resolution that did include city signature lines. So they essentially pushed it back across the table to me. And then the county, I had a meeting with Jay Serena and a number of others, and essentially we all had a conversation and then a conference call with Cal Recycle. And as I put the question to Cal Recycle, it appeared to me that based on that conversation, the county was very much interested in trying to find a pledge of revenue agreement that did not include their signature lines either. And so I posed the question of, could we adopt such an agreement? And essentially Cal Recycle said, so long as the agreement itself that got adopted indicates that if anybody tries to back out of this, that we need to work that out before you're able to back out, they're okay with it. So bottom line is, we have a new resolution that does not have any signature lines except for those of the authority, and this is a good thing in that this is the way that we take care of the liabilities associated with the landfill. We pledge revenues from the Del Norte County Transfer Station, and that is within the control of this board, and so I recommend adoption of this resolution.
Move to approve?
I'll second.
I want to get the public input on this. Does anybody in the public wish to address this resolution of pledge of revenue agreement establishing financial assurance for post-closure maintenance and corrective action at the Crescent City landfill? Does anybody in the public wish to address this? All right, I've seen anyone. Then we have a motion and we have a second.
Mr. Gitlin?
Yes. Discussion.
I just wanted to say that when the city got the request, we didn't handle this flippantly in any way. We actually consulted our council, and it was suggested by our council that we not go forward with something that we hadn't pledged to do in the past as a signor. So that was the result of this. But I think this is a good alternative.
And I want to make clear, I have no objections in any way for the city or the county representing their interests and asserting the way things they want should be. So, but I would recommend that this action include both the adoption of the Pledge of Revenue Agreement and the adoption of the Resolution 2014-02.
Is that what your motion inferred on? Whose motion was it? Was it yours, Mike? Okay, will you include that? Sure. Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay. We've closed public comment on that, and we'll go forward to closing off comments here on our board. No other further input, so Karen, if you would please call the roll, call the vote on this.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, collections franchise discussion 5.1, discussion possible action regarding collections change order number 5, making rate adjustments based on changes in disposal costs and changes to the consumer price index. Ted?
I'd be happy to discuss this comprehensively if the board so chooses, because they all kind of go together. Previously, the board has given me direction to negotiate a change order with both Recology, Del Norte, and Hambro Waste Solutions Group based on the consumer price index increased service fees on both of those agreements as per our agreements. And so this is a standard thing that happens every year about this time, and it's an inflation-based adjustment of the rates. So there's a small increase, and in terms of Recology Del Norte, there's a slightly larger increase this year in that we do not increase their payments based on disposal every single year, because of course, every single year, based on the CPI index, the rates at the transfer station go up slightly. In the Recology Del Norte agreement, once those transfer station rates go up 5%, then we have to incorporate those changes into their rates as well. And so I think this might be a good time. Pop on here. You can hand these out here. So this is in the This is in handouts that the board is receiving now. But essentially what I wanted to highlight was that in the transfer station, in the collection franchise agreement, each of their rates has a component for collection, transport, and tipping, which is either disposal or recycling. And so you can see that not all of their rates are affected by changes in the disposal prices equally, but those percentages are incorporated into the calculations about how the rate adjustments go. So this sheet here that I have highlighted on the screen gives you a good comparison about how much the rates are changing. And certainly you can see that the most expensive rates for the largest bins are having the largest changes. There. This one's budget, but that's okay. Yeah, that's all right. That's okay. It was, but it's okay. All right. So, and I think I will leave that up. So, that said, I would recommend that the board adopt change order 5 and approve signatures.
Let's go to the public on this. There is anyone in the public who wishes to come up to the speaker and discuss these changes on order number 5?
Just a point of information on this before.
Go ahead.
This is built in the contract, right?
Yes, it is.
So it's a contractual obligation. I would move to approve and then.
Okay, I always like to let the public get involved with this and acknowledge that. So you've got a motion to approve and a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Discussion?
Well, no, I'm just gonna, I thought you were gonna open public comment.
Well, I'm going to ask the public if they wish to, and I think we need just to acknowledge and say that the tipping fees will be increased to $142.24 a ton. And
That's not the increase. That's,
well, no, that's the amount. It's the increase too. Let me clear that. The current, with this adjustment, I'll clarify that. With this adjustment, the tipping fees will be $142.24 per ton. Now, I just want to get that into the record, not the increase, but the existing amount, because we all are hearing these tipping fees. These numbers are bandying around kind of frivolously sometimes, but with this approval, and we have a motion and a second to approve, everyone in the public and on the viewing audience should know that our tipping fees will be, at the end of this day, $142.24 per ton.
starting July 1st.
Thank you. Okay, for effective July 1st. Okay, we can call the vote.
Commissioner
there-
Hawley?
Is there any additional comments at this point, Mayor, Commissioner Wilson? I'm sorry. Did you have additional?
I did just want to say for the viewing public that I have questioned these in the past, if we have to give this each year, and as Commissioner Sullivan said, it is part of the contract, and so we abide by our contracts, and we need to make these adjustments based on the consumer price index, so that's why there's no discussion at this point in time. I don't think there's anything we can really do about it if we were, but I do think there is inflation this year, so I think it's appropriate this year. So I just wanted to comment about that for the public's knowledge.
Commissioner Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Gitlin. And you were very correct in what you said, Mr. Gitlin. I just wanted to clarify for everyone in the audience that the difference in next year's rate and this year's rate per ton is $1.77 per ton. So it's only a difference of 1.26%. Okay?
And I appreciate your comments on that. I think it's important when we're dealing with numbers that the public be fully aware of what exactly is the dynamic. And I appreciate the fact that it's a modest increase and it's one per contract. But I'm not so one to cavalierly, I guess is the word I'm using, accept the fact that we just have this rampant runaway ebbing flow of inflation. I'm one who wants to keep costs down as best we can, and though in this case that's not the case, but for future, we want to keep our costs as intact as much as possible.
Well, you probably want to talk to the board that approved the contracts a
Okay.
long time ago, because I don't think any of us sat on the board at that point. So.
Well, that's not something I could do, but at this point, we're looking at the future. So I think at this point, let's close this off and take the vote. Karen, if you would, please.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes?
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes, okay. And we'll move on to Transfer Station 6.1, discussion and possible action regarding letter from Edward Inowski regarding the Interstate Commerce Clause as it may affect the disposal of materials from Delmar County landfills located in Oregon. And I think we have Mr. White, Wes White from Hambro WSG. You'll address that?
Good afternoon, Wes White with Hambro WSG. And I know there was some concern on the board's part about two items with respect to our contract with the landfill. Number one is the capacity, and number two is the possibility of, any possibility of the state of Oregon banning any incoming garbage from California. So I've asked Gary Penning, who's back here, to address you. I think there's a letter in your packet. Gary is the Marketing Director and Governmental Affairs Director for Dry Creek Landfill. So, Gary.
Welcome, Mr. Penny. Is it P-E-N-N-Y?
Penning.
Penning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here today. Appreciate it, Your Honor, and members of the board. Wes brought this up, that it had come up in some discussions, so we had our attorney in Portland look at this, and if you've had a chance to read the letter, actually one of the cases that was stated was the State of Oregon DEQ with my actual former employer, Oregon Waste Systems, which is part of Waste Management, back, I believe that last case was around 1990, where they can't even impose an additional fee on the waste coming into the state. So, in fact, the Oregon DEQ, because everyone's doing such a good job of recycling and reducing the amount of waste, their revenues are generated from a tip fee that's charged, doesn't matter if it's in-state waste or out-of-state waste, and that has been declining over the years. And actually, the Oregon DEQ right now has a statewide panel, of which I'm participating on, and how they can address their declining fees in the face of declining revenues, because the amount of waste being disposed of is going down. It's sort of like the fuel tax with hybrid cars and electric cars. They're using the system, but they aren't necessarily paying the same fees. So they're having the same issue. So we thought we'd put this letter together for you. If there's any questions on this, I'd be more than happy to answer that, and then I can talk about the life of the landfill.
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Penning?
No, it was a very enlightening letter. I thought the examples that were given were very, very clear, that cannot discriminate waste coming from one area out of the state or in the state because of the Commerce Clause, that are to be charged the same. And so I thought it answered a lot of questions. I didn't realize, I wasn't concerned about it. I didn't realize there was an issue, but now I feel very comfortable in regards to, again, our relationship with Dry Creek. I feel is so important, and we appreciate it.
Excellent. Any additional comments from commissioners at this time? Then, Mr. Penning, I'll ask you to deliver the second part of your report, which you...
As far as the capacity of the Dry Creek landfill, we have actually over a century left of airspace at the facility. So we are permitted to place waste in 250 acres through the Oregon DEQ. Currently, we have only utilized 50 acres of that. And if you could imagine just a base of 250 acres, we're using a small portion of it. So as we build that base out, and we do this in increments that we call cells. Typically when we started the landfill, they would last about 5 years. Now they're lasting 7 to 10 years. But as that base gets bigger, we continue to build a pyramid, essentially, and the top continues to grow. So we may add a cell the first year, and it lasts 5 years, we add another cell. If we get to the top, and then we go over both cells, we add a third cell, we get to the top, we go over all 3 cells. So as that base expands, the life of each cell lasts longer. So we're expecting the next cell to last anywhere from 10 to 12 years. We're just beginning to go into a new cell this summer that will last probably 7 years. So our next construction phase will probably be a decade down the road. So as that 250-acre base grows, we'll continue to have capacity. And with recycling and reuse and reduction and all those things, there could be an excess of a century of capacity. So for your viewing pleasure, you won't find this on Netflix. This is a short little 5-minute video. We always extend an invitation for anyone to come and visit our landfill. Actually, we're very proud of it. We produce electricity for about 3,000 homes in Jackson County from the methane that's produced. We have a composting facility there. And just a lot of things, peripherals that go into taking care of disposing waste properly. But this gives you a brief review of the landfill and what we do. And my business cards are attached to this. If you happen to get up to Medford and you got an extra hour or so, I'd be more than happy to arrange for a tour so you can actually see what's generated here, how it's placed and disposed of properly. So any questions as far as the capacity?
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Penning? And again,
Just glad
Go ahead.
to hear about that capacity, of course. We depend on you, and I appreciate you coming down here. I've not met you before, and it's good that you're a partner in this relationship.
I'm on the school board in Grants Pass, and our board meetings are always the same day as your meetings, so I could never make them. So now that they're on Wednesday, I hope that you'll see my face a little more often, probably not every month, but more often.
appreciate that. And again, what I'm hearing is that there's no invitation that there's possible interstate interference with moving solid waste from state to state, and there seems to be quite a big window for the landfill to continue for at least 100 years. So this is all good news.
Good. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your business. And enjoy your Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you, Mr. Penning. Okay, any public comment on Mr. Penning's delivery? Okay, we'll move on, close public comments. Move on to 6.2, discussion possible action regarding sewer assessment for assessor parcel number 115-180-22. That's right there at the waste treatment facility, at the transfer station. Excuse me, Ted. Go ahead,
Yeah.
6.2.
So this is something that came up subsequent to most of our efforts drafting the budget, and it's an additional charge associated with bonds that were used to develop the Birch Ocean View water system. And bottom line is that if we could pay $10,532, that would bring us current for 2013-14, and payments would continue at a much lower rate, more in the range of $800 to $1,000 a year through fiscal year 2017-2018. So what I'll do, if the board doesn't give me more specific alternate direction, is I'll work with looking at our current budget, see if we could find a place to pay this from, and do it through a budget transfer. And if that's not possible, then negotiate possibly a payment plan with the Community Development Department, as they've negotiated with other entities in this regard, so that we can make payments towards this, if not the full amount that they're requesting, to bring us current. But as I said, once we bring ourselves current, the next payment for fiscal year 14-15 is not $10,000, but is $1,171. So it's a much lower payment that we could probably fit into the budget without much difficulty, but this $10,000 bill is harder.
And for the public's information, again, this is something that hadn't been charged to the authority since 2005, and it came to light, as Mr. Ward said, through the budgeting process, and they all of a sudden realized that the authority has not been paying for sewer assessment all these years, and so that's why this year it's the $10,000 it's paying for all those other years. So then once we pay this, then it'll just be approximately $1,700 a year each year, not $10,000.
And-
I'd like to pay it all at once, though.
And it's not that we haven't been paying it so much as we had not been billed. So we were not aware of
We're
this
not billed.
liability at all. Right.
Commissioners, any additional comments? None? You know, again, how we slipped through the cracks on this one. So someone didn't bill us, and then we're having this situation where we're looking at an unanticipated $10,500 cost. So I'll entertain, I think before we do a motion, do we want to have Ted go back and research our state of the budget and see if this can be included in next month's budget as a installment payment or a payment in full? Is that the pleasure of
I think
the...
we have enough to pay it in full, may as well pay it and get out of our hair.
Well, I'll entertain that motion then.
Well,
Yeah, if it's, okay,
What are you suggesting, Mary?
that it be paid in full.
That it be paid in full in 1
Yeah.
year?
Okay, then Commissioner Wilson has indicated wants to make the motion. Do we have a second on that? Well, I'll second it just for purposes of this discussion, and then let's have a discussion on this. So we have a motion and a second. Let's find out what we need to do on this. We have a motion to pay it in full, and we need to find out where we stand on our budget. I don't want to put us in a hardball situation.
That's the real issue, is really where the budget transfer would come from, and I honestly haven't figured that out. We have a budget transfer that was just approved at this meeting, and I have not yet looked at where this additional money would come from. So I'd be happy to bring that forward at the next meeting as a budget transfer if that can be worked out. And if for some reason I don't think it can be worked out, which would surprise me, I would come back with an alternative proposal about the way to get this paid as promptly as possible.
So with the consent of the board, we'll table this until the next meeting. This will be a pending matter for our June meeting. With the consent of the board, does anybody object to that?
Well, yeah, that's why I was going to question that. Do we need a vote for it or just consensus from the board for?
I just want to get a consensus from our board. Okay, so you'll report back to us next month at the noon, and then the motion will stand to pay it in full. If it's not possible, then we'll amend that.
Since we have a motion on the floor, we could possibly have a substitute motion to table this item till the next meeting.
I'll entertain that right now. A substitute motion to table? Do we have a substitute motion?
The question we had is consensus sufficient, or you
Well,
need to do
a
something about
motion.
the first motion?
A motion to table.
Okay, so you need a motion to table the existing.
table the item
Okay, all right, so we have, and we have a motion and we have a second, okay. So let's take a vote now on the motion to table. Go ahead. Commissioner Wilson, you had something to say?
yes,
Go ahead.
yes. I
Okay,
was going to vote.
okay, we're going to do that. Karen, if you just poll the vote.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes,
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes, and that is a motion to table. We want to dot all the i's and cross all the t's. Okay, we're moving on to 6.3, discussion possible action regarding transfer station operations, change order number 19, adjusting service fees based on the changes to the consumer price index, 6.3.
This is the second of three parts, adjusting the rates effective July 1st. So this is the change order per the agreement with Hambro Waste Solutions Group to adjust their service fees based on changes to the consumer price index.
And it's per contract.
It's per contract.
Move to approve.
second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. Any further board discussion? Okay, let's take the vote. Karen?
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes,
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, we're moving along to 6.4, discussion and possible action regarding adoption of Resolution 2014-03. That is a resolution of the governing board of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority adjusting rates for the Del Norte County Transfer Station, the Klamath and Gasky transfer stations, and the franchise collection rates. Ted?
So this is the third part of the three parts, and this is the actual adoption of a rate ordinance. I'm waiting for a screen. Hello? Okay. So, looking at our total system revenues, you can see that Recology, according to their fiscal reports for last year, brought in a little over 4 million. Hambro brought in, or according to budget, is about 1.76 million, and we're just under $1 million. So, with these rate ordinances going to effect, even after the rate changes become effective, we are, the rates here in Del Norte County at the Del Norte County Transfer Station are still lower than all of the rates. Next year, they will be lower than all of the rates this year in those other communities in Humboldt and Curry counties. Similarly, our minimum charge is also lower than anybody else's minimum charge. So we will continue to have the lowest rates in the community once these transfer station rates are adjusted and adopted. So I want to make sure that you all knew that, because it's certainly something to be proud of, and it's a good service to our community.
We'll open it up for public discussion at this time. Does anybody from the public wish to come up and discuss this resolution of the Governing Board of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority adjusting rates for the transfer station at Klamath and Gasky? Seeing none, we'll close public and we'll bring it back to the board. Do we have a discussion here on the board or a motion?
I'll move that we adopt Resolution 2014-03, a resolution of the Governing Board of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority adjusting rates for the Del Norte County Transfer Station, the Klamath and Gasky Transfer Stations, and the franchise collection rates.
Was there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion to approve this resolution and a second has been. Okay, board discussion? Okay, we'll call the vote.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, moving on to 7.1, discussion possible action item regarding the status and/or contents of the report from the Del Norte County Sheriff's Department regarding the investigation of financial management by the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. Council Rice, I'm going to refer to you first.
Yes, about a couple weeks ago, I was finally able to get in contact with both Sheriff Wilson as well as County Counsel Gretchen Sturr, and we were kind of able to all get on the same page with where we were at with this investigation. The investigation itself has been done for quite a while. The sheriff's report has been signed. I'd like everyone to know that under the Public Records Act, these types of investigatory reports are not public records. They don't have to be disclosed. However, if it's in the public interest, some information may be disclosed. So the sort of compromise in this situation was that the sheriff was going to allow the report to be viewed, but not to make copies and have it widely disseminated throughout the community, since that would really serve no purpose. So I went down there on Friday, May 16th to review the report. It's brief. There wasn't really a lot of specific information in there. The investigating detective stated that his conclusion was that there had been financial embezzlement from the authority, but that there was not evidence to indicate who did this, an exact time frame of when they did this, or really even how they did this, as far as so there's really not a lot of specific facts known. It's unfortunate, but I recall from the beginning that we were told that this type of scheme is often very hard to prove and to pinpoint on somebody. So unfortunately at this point, We don't have any answers. It is possible that in the future, you know, somebody may step forward or some new evidence may come to light. But at this point, it's just unsolved as to specifically what happened.
Thank you, Council Rice. I'm going to bring it to the public's attention right now, and they wish to comment on item number 7.1. Now is the time to do so. Public? Having seen none, we'll close the public section. We'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Commissioners, does anybody have a comment on the disposition of this closed investigation?
Well, it's not an answer that we didn't expect. I mean, after we hired the forensic accounting to look through, and there's no smoking gun, nothing to, it's disappointing that we couldn't come to some kind of conclusion, but not surprising.
Commissioner Hawley?
I just hope that with this, with your discussion with the sheriff's office and this, the public acknowledgement that this is where they are, maybe, you know, the staff will feel a little bit less like there's a cloud hanging over them and we can move on about our business.
I have a question for Council Rice. I'm wondering, did the report indicate in any way that these ongoing fiscal issues were continuing or they had stopped?
It did indicate they did not think that this was ongoing any longer, based on the new procedures that have been put in place, as well as the surprise cash counts. It appears that everything is
Fixed.
moving along more in a regular, prudent
Although
fashion.
it does reinforce what we thought. This wasn't bad checks. Somebody stole money. So that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Commissioner Sullivan on this, that there was something that took place, and based on the fact that we've had no fewer than 3 unannounced audits, and I know, Sherrick, you're here to affirm that you have dropped in unannounced, and you have found that there's been, everything's been balanced down to the penny. So I just want to ascertain that we don't have an ongoing problem with financial management, but we did at some point. And I'm inclined, with regard to this report, to move on the side of caution, because their reputation's at stake, and people who currently work there, we don't want them under this kind of situation. The problem does not exist as we know it now, based on our auditor, and I'm inclined to leave this item alone right now, not make it a public document, because it may compromise a future investigation. So do we have a consensus from our board on that? So no action on this? Commissioner Sullivan, did you have a comment you want to make on that?
No,
Okay.
I don't think this is an action item anyway.
It's not an action item, but the board can choose to direct in certain areas, and I think it would probably be prudent not to do so in this one, because it's a dynamic situation that may change. Okay, so we'll move on to 7.2, discussion of possible action regarding management report and financial statements together with independent auditor's report for the year ending June 30th, 2013. Ted?
Yeah, essentially this is our annual external audit, and it's complete at this point, and there were some comments, and you can see that our responses are included there, and I'll ask our treasurer, Rich Taylor, in case he has anything additional to add as a summary of how this audit came out.
Commissioners, any questions on this audit? Anything you want to? It's what they call a clean opinion, but they have several suggestions for us.
Yes, again, I had several questions that I did not get a chance to meet with the county auditor regarding the differences between the county auditor and the outside auditor reports. There was approximately, the revenues checked out okay. There were some late postings, and I did get a chance to talk with Sherrick regarding some of the other issues that I had concerns about last time, the differences. And I feel very comfortable after working all the figures back to had laid out actually kind of a expense and revenue report, and I felt that they were both online with that. So I know I brought up quite a few issues and numbers last time. After working them through, I was able to kind of figure out why they were the way they were. It has something to do with the OPEB,
Yes.
which is, again, the unfunded liabilities that are, that this body hasn't set aside all the money that they will have to pay out in the future for retirements. And so there were some issues about that, but I feel comfortable that I did get my questions answered, regarding the differences between the two. And I did have a couple questions though about the auditor's report.
Let me interrupt you just for a moment, Commissioner Wilson. I see Sheriff Cron, you are here. Would you like to address our group with regard to the differences and reconciling these numbers between the auditor's report and the Smith and Newell report?
There probably will be some differences. I talked with Rich last week and was presented with a set of adjusting journal entries that our office was not aware of prior. And I actually have questions for Smith and Newell on those entries. One of the major things that you guys will see after we post those adjusting entries is the recognition of the OPEB liability on your balance sheet. Another is that they want to eliminate the deferred revenue that we had previously recognized through the process. So there will be adjustments to the carry forward accounts receivable and the deferred revenue that resulted after September 30th, after we closed the accrual period.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. And again, my inclination is to have you come back, the auditor's office come back next month after you reconcile that, which would mean that we would not, and I'm presuming this is an action item, Ted, to adopt the Smith and Newell report, but I'm thinking that we may need to get some additional information both from Smith and Newell and from the auditor's office. So, Ted, what is the action item here to adopt?
I believe Smith and Newell's work at this point is complete.
That would be correct.
So it's receive and file at this point. I don't think there's additional action that's required in order to complete this work.
And basically what we would be doing with the adjusting journal entries would be to, as they presented your financial statements, to get the statements that we have on the county books in line with the way that the financials are presented. There's also a few items where there will be differences, that things are presented for a presentation purpose only, to where they group things together, and Commissioner Wilson and I have talked about that before, and trying to work backwards and getting that lined up. And it's something that I would do with anybody. We do with the county, and in working back to those figures.
Will you communicate to Mr. Shad that we'd like his office to come back here and reconcile those differences, if there are differences in the final report for next month?
Absolutely.
Okay, at this point, I'll entertain a motion to receive. Yes,
Bit
go
more
ahead.
discussion. So for the public's information, again, this body is our net position is improved by $102,000 over the course of the year. So that's kind of the final that came out of the audit. Part of those were grants, but basically with our revenues and our expenses, the difference between the two, we are ahead of the game by $102,000 for this agency for this fiscal year ending June 30th, 2013. So that's kind of what the bottom line gets down from the audit, which is good news. And then again, just there were some other things that were in here that were big, were the accounts receivable, which was changed, that they had mentioned. Again, we'd had the same accounts receivable until about February of this year. It had been from July through February until we had an adjustment, and so that was something that we hope to keep up with better going on to the next year. But all in all, it looks good, and we're going to be in pretty good financial shape.
Okay, do we have a motion to receive and file?
Mr. Gitlin, I just have one more.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Question, actually.
Commissioner Hawley.
And that has to do with the timing of the audit. Is it so late because is it linked with the county's audit? It just seems like if we're dealing with a fiscal year, and this is ended June 30th of 2013, and here we are in May of 2014, if there were something substantial that we had to be worried about, that's a lot of months to be running like that.
It is a typical timeframe. They run, usually do our field work sometime in November after the fiscal year is closed. We expect usually to have at least a draft report sometime in March so that it can be evaluated and a final report issued around that time.
Okay, so the county lags a little behind
Yes.
a lot of the other, okay, very good.
Yes.
Hey,
And some of
found the
it,
missing money. It wasn't Smith and Newell. So Smith and Newell dropped the ball on that.
I just was questioning the timeframes. Okay, thank you.
yes, it is more of a detailed process to where that happens, so.
And I know
It is typical.
doesn't affect our bottom line, but that $198,000 prepayment, I was a bit confused. I had called Mr. Ward about that because that happened in, I think, October of this year, and I thought at the time that that $198,000 was going to go backward into this fiscal year ending June 30th, 2013, and then was the discussion at the time, but as looking through records, I found that actually it was just put in December of 2013, so this next year, so I guess it's just our balance sheet, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would affect the balance sheet.
Will show a $200,000 difference because of a prepayment to a loan that we have through the county.
But with the balance sheet, there'd be an offset to that also, so the net position doesn't change.
Yeah, I didn't notice this in here, so I talked to Mr. Ward about it because we thought that it was going backwards last year, but it looks like it's gonna be in this year.
Yep.
Okay, board, I'll come back to the board. All right.
Oh,
Okay, we have more comment.
What's that?
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
What? Excuse me?
The $198,000 is in the June 30th, 2013. It's in the audited report. They put it in June 30th, 2013.
They did, because I found it on my report that was, we had talked about it. I found it in December.
Yeah, and I have it recorded as January under the county's books. So this, of course, this is the external auditors, and so they're slightly different.
So the external auditor did put it back in last year?
Yes. It's on your statement net position about the fifth line down, deposit from Del Norte County, $188,177.
Okay, so then hopefully then our county auditor has done the same?
Yes, I think he said that then the county auditor will adjust their books to the outside auditor.
Yeah, that's what we thought had been done, but when we actually looked at the paperwork that had come in our records, it reflected that it was in.
We're going to have these answers clarified at our next meeting, so any of these questions on when something was posted or
I think
not?
you just clarified it for us.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we're good on that, okay. All right, board, we'll come back to you for action on receipt and filing of the audit from Smith & Newell.
I'll move to accept and file the audit.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have movement and second. Any further board discussion? Karen, if you would take the vote.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes?
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, 7.3, discussion, possible action item regarding the reappointment of Mary Wilson to serve as the Public Commissioner through March of 2015. Okay, Ted, if you'd explain what the term is and
Yes.
what we're proposing to change.
So there isn't a term that's specified currently under the First Amended Joint Powers Agreement. All that's specified is that the public member is annually approved separately by the City Council and Board of Supervisors. Based on the conversation at the last regular authority meeting, it appeared that the board did want to have this item on, and so there isn't a staff report on it, but if the board would care to reappoint Mary Wilson as Public Commissioner through March 2015, then that's certainly a possibility. Following this item is a draft resolution 2014-04 looking at establishing a standard term for the public commissioner so we wouldn't face this confusion again. There is some rationale of the March 2015 date was merely a one additional year past the point that she had been appointed. And in some ways that cycle makes sense because it usually takes a meeting or two for us to have all of the appointed commissioners separately from the city council and the board of supervisors appointed to the commissioner board, and that's really the point at which those other 4 commissioners would select the public commissioner.
Rather than making it, let's say, February to February, because the board meets January, city council makes its appointments, et cetera. Wouldn't it be better served to amend that date to February?
Understood. My thought on that, and of course this is at the board's discretion, is that should the board say they get together and they're in February, and now this is the first time that they've met together, they could decide that they would like to continue the same person who's appointed, or maybe they decide that they want to then advertise and let people know that they're accepting applications, and so that gives an extra month to receive those.
Very good. We'll bring it to the board's attention right now. So this is the action regarding the reappointment of Mary Wilson to serve as the public commissioner through March of 2015. Moved by Commissioner Sullivan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Gastineau. Any further board discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on. We'll take the vote.
Public comment.
That's it. I'm sorry, I missed. Public comments, I'm sorry. Public, this is your opportunity to come up and speak of item 7.3 on the reappointment of Mary Wilson to serve as the public commissioner through March of 2015. Seeing none, we'll close that and bring it back to the board.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson? You can vote if you'd like, or you can recuse yourself. Chairman Gitlin?
That would be yes. So the vote is 4-0 with 1 abstention. Please note Mary Wilson chose not to vote for herself as a recusal. Okay, so let's move on to 7.4 and the actual physical changing of the adoption of the resolution 2014-04, which will the governing board of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority establishing the standard term of the public commissioner. And I'm going to guess, Ted, you'll speak on this, but this is for a 24-month term.
It is for a 24-month term for the next appointment, whoever that might be. But having just taken the action, Ms. Wilson's term will continue through March 2015, and this essentially clarifies the rules so that we don't have to have this discussion on an ongoing basis as to how are we going to work this process so that everybody understands. So that's the intent of this resolution, just to clarify how and when the public member is appointed, and how we continue to follow the First Amended Joint Powers Agreement that essentially does require that this public member be approved or ratified annually by the City Council and the Board of Supervisors. So even though there's a 2-year term, there's an annual ratification process.
Okay, bring it back to the board. Any further comments? We'll open it up at this time to the public on the term being extended from 12 to 24 months. Any public comment on this? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for adoption. Do I have a motion?
Well, I think this makes sense to extend to a 2-year term for the public member. They're not dealing with this stuff on a regular basis, and I think it takes a little bit to get under their belt, so to speak, to get at least familiar with it. So I would move to adopt the resolution.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Gastineau. Any further board comment? Okay, Karen, if you would, we'll take the vote.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
And Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. 7.5, discussion possible action item regarding the budget of fiscal year 2014-15 as scheduled for public hearing for for June 11th for final adoption. Now, we brought this up in a special meeting, so Ted, where did we leave off and what questions were left unanswered?
I did my best to try to address all of the issues that were raised by the commissioners at that meeting, including the elimination of the line for for commissioner expenses. And we clarified that the authority's contributions to post-employment benefits are actually tracked separately, so there's no need to create a separate accounting of that, as it already exists and is separately accounted. So I can offer that reassurance, and I think those were the major outstanding issues. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners?
I'd only say that it appears that it's exactly the same budget that was presented to us during the budget workshop, isn't it?
With the elimination of that line.
Right,
Yes.
after the budget workshop. Okay, thank you.
It is a balanced budget.
Did we ever resolve the issue in the life insurance stuff for employees?
Thank you for asking, for reminding me about that question. Yes, we did, and that is, there is a sheet in your packet between the report for the current fiscal year for 13-14 and the projected budget for next year, and you can see a listing of our different staff folks, and you do have a management life insurance line there. And I did meet with Mr. Shad about that, and he explained that that was required under the employee agreement, that there's a separate management life insurance. It is not being paid for anybody who does not currently work for the authority, and so the only person who's covered by that provision is myself.
Okay, so there's no director's life insurance in there, because I know the previous director had a separate policy the authority paid for him, and since we don't have a director right now, I don't think, and I wouldn't be inclined to provide it to whoever steps into that role in the future, but I'm not sure, is that still budgeted in here on the breakdown? Is the management life insurance just for current management, or is it for expected management? Just for current, okay. I'm fine with, and I think that provided life insurance across the board for counties the same way, but I just want to make sure there's no executive insurance policy that we're building into our budget.
Any additional commissioner comments? All right.
Did you get the information that you wanted here regarding the breakout on the payroll? And I'm talking to Mike.
No, I'm still, right now, we've only got one acting director, but we've got payroll built in for a separate employee now. So that was my question, is about how to separate that out within the budget, so it reflects that we have a line item, like a excess fund that potentially could be used, but one of the recommendations is to go to one director, not a manager and a director, but to have one director in the R3 report. So I would prefer to just put this off as a reserve line item. There must be a way to list that as a line item, Sherrick, or?
Sheriff, come on up to the, because we're on TV and we want to get everybody properly heard.
It is separated. I haven't reviewed the specific budget to know what the personnel breakdown is, but typically it is broken out as a separate line item so that it's easily identifiable, but there's nothing carried on at all.
Okay.
There is a page here. I don't know if this is the breakout. I don't know what page it would be.
That was the one that Ted was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
that's
has-
the sheet.
That doesn't.
Mr. Shad prepares specific, personnel projections that all program managers use. I know Ted's been in and he's asked me a question on it. I know he's asked Mr. Shad also.
So it is split out somewhere.
It is split out.
But we just don't see it right here.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have I didn't review that specific budget, but typically it is split out.
Each position is.
Yes.
Okay.
And the related benefits for those.
Okay.
Any additional board comments? Public? I'll open up public comments on this. This is 7.5, discussion possible action item regarding proposed budget for fiscal year 2014-15 is scheduled for final adoption. Do anybody from the public wish to opine? Come up to the, seeing none, we'll close that. And I see no further board comments, so we'll bring it back. Do we have a motion to adopt?
I don't know if we send it on, don't we?
So, yeah, we have essentially two recommendations, assuming that there are no additional comments or changes, that the board directs staff to transmit the proposed budget to the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors and the Crescent City Council as required under the Joint Powers Agreement, and return with any written comments that are adopted by either of these boards, and to set a public hearing and provide public notice for the final adoption of the budget to be at 3:45 on June 11th, 2014.
Are those, will that be one inclusive motion, or do we need to do separate?
Just need direction from the board.
Okay, do we have a consensus on the board to do that? Any? Okay, so directed.
All right, great.
Okay. We'll move on. This is item number 7.6, discussion and possible action item regarding policies and programs related to used oil recycling in Del Norte County. Mr. Jacobs, I see you're here in the audience. You brought something to my attention, and I want to give you an opportunity to present this. This is the way we take our used oil in, and I have the information you gave me, the California Health and Safety Code 25250-11. I think this is something you provided me. So let us hear what your concern is.
Yes, for some time.
Just identify yourself and your city.
Johnny Jacobs, Bayside Excavation. For some time, I've been trying to get past director Kevin Hendricks to accept waste oil out here in a commercial form. It seemed like a no-brainer to me because they get paid for it. I've been taking it to Brookings, anywhere from 1 barrel to 5 barrels a year, and they take it for free. So they sell it, they get the revenue. There's no reason that I could see why you couldn't bring it out here. And if you look at the Health and Safety Code, it says the only requirement that I have to meet to bring it out here is that I have to notify the authority ahead of time before I bring it out there so that they have adequate facilities to hold it. In the past, they've been requiring that the maximum you can do is transport it in 5-gallon pails, 15 gallons maximum. Well, hell, I'd be there for half the year doing just for my D8 cat because it holds like 240 gallons of oil. So if you go to change and service your machine, there's 240 gallons of oil that the county could be getting revenue from. But we're passing it by. I'm giving it to Curry Transfer up there for free. So I ask that the board make the transfer station out here accept our oil. Doesn't matter whether it's private or commercial, as long as we phone ahead to make sure that they know we're on our way in and bring in a 55-gallon drum. The only question would be, do they want us to provide a pump that we can pump it out of the 55-gallon drum into their container? Or do they want us to leave our container there and be responsible for emptying it out when the transfer comes in and returning our barrel? It would seem like to me that they'd want it incumbent on us to pump it out of our barrel into theirs, either by their machine or bring our own pump to pump it into their tank. But I would like you guys to instruct the transfer station to start accepting commercial oil, because unless you're a big entity, you're not going to get anyone to stop by to receive that little tiny bit of oil from us. And then also where they come up from Humboldt County or Santa Rosa, you're tied up, or I'm tied up as a business owner. I'm tied up for anywhere from 1 to 7 hours waiting for them to appear to pick up my oil, when I could just take it out here and let the county make money from it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Ted, you have prepared a staff report on this. What's your take?
Yeah. I actually have a question for Mr. Jacobs, because we have met, and I'm wondering, we talked and reviewed that this service is available at Recology Del Norte, and I'm wondering, is there a reason why that service doesn't work for you?
Well, I wasn't aware that there is one at Recology Center, and it seems kind of redundant to take it there, and then they take it there, and then West takes it to Medford or somewhere. Seems like a hell of a lot of handling for nothing when you could just do it one place and be done with it. Is there a reason why you can't take it out there? And
Well, the issue is that the service is available. It's currently available as you described, where if you call in advance, people who have commercial quantities of oil can bring up to 55-gallon drum to Recology. They have an ability to pump it from, after they sniff to make sure that it's not contaminated, they have the ability to pump it from the drum into their tank. And this is done by prior arrangement. This is a system that we set up back in 2000 under the previous franchise agreement, in which we used part of the one of the oil grants to buy a tank for Recology so that they could provide this service. Part of the reason that we've separated the commercial and the residential quantities of oil is that folks who have, and I'm not in any way disparaging anyone who has a 55-gallon drum, but our experience has been that folks with 55-gallon drums of oil tend to have oil that is typically more frequently contaminated than smaller quantities. It could be because someone leaves a lid off that is exposed to the rain. It can be that it's a larger commercial truck shop, and when you blow a head gasket, that's where the fluids go. There can be lots of different reasons, but the bottom line is that a 55-gallon drum of oil is a larger quantity of oil, has a greater potential for spilling, and is potentially a contamination source for the full tank. And so, having talked this through with Joel Wallen and Huamua and Brian McNally of the Health Department, my understanding from what the conversation with Joel was that they would essentially have to keep the 55-gallon drum, and they would wait until the collection company came by, and then they would empty that tank directly. And in the meantime, they would have to store those 55-gallon drums on secondary containment pallets and then track whose drum that was so that they could get that back, or recycle it in the metals pile, and then the residual oil has a chance of getting onto the transfer station floor, which is another potential source of contamination that we don't currently have. So there's a number of reasons why this would be a potentially significant additional level of work and effort to offer a service that is already available at Recology, which is nearly as close as the transfer station to many people who live in the larger Crescent City area. And so, for all of those reasons, my recommendation is that we take no action.
Thank you.
on our part,
Go ahead.
why don't you make that in advertising so all of us out in the public know that? Every time we call in there, your deal and your paper ads say no oil, no commercial oil. Why don't you say in those ads that take it out to the Recology?
Everyone who calls and asks, what can I do with my commercial
Well,
quantity of
I've
oil?
called several
hold on.
times.
And I met with you at a table, and I told you exactly
Let's
this.
hold on a second. Ted, hold on. Johnny, hold on. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. I see Wes White is here. Wes, on behalf of Hambro, would you mind giving us your opinion on your ability or willingness to process these 55-gallon drums of oil? And I see Tommy Sparrow, you're here. If you care to have any opinion on this, if you could give us your opinion on this issue. You don't have to, but I'm going to give that opportunity to you. So, Mr. White, your company is the one that actually processes this oil, is that correct?
That's correct.
So the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority is not physically touching it, it's just overseer.
That's
so what's your opinion on this?
We can handle, there's three problems, and Johnny is correct with respect to transportation of 55-gallon drums only, and making an appointment is our understanding of the law. As far as operationally, we have two potential problems. One is, how do we get it from the drum into the, we've got I think it's a 1,000-gallon drum storage tank out there. So that's problem one. So our take was that we should just keep it in the 55-gallon drum. So we could return that drum after the oil recycler came in and took the oil away. Problem number two is the handling of the drum itself. So you need a forklift clamp, and we've got a forklift clamp, so it is somewhat problematic, but we can handle it. So it's really a board decision. It's, you know,
All right, so
we're not pro or
your
con.
company is not adverse to this?
We're not adverse to
Okay.
it.
I see the health code law reads, it specifically states not to exceed 55 gallons. It says it in a number of places. We happen to have a policy which limits it to 15 gallons in 5-gallon increments. So that's why Mr. Jacobs is coming up here asking for an accommodation. And we want to find out that people are actually going to do this process. Is this a moneymaker for the authority? Does this actually generate funds by doing it?
No, it is not. Hambro receives the funds from any recycled oil, as we do all recycled materials. And we incur the cost of recycling them, whatever cost might be incurred.
So this would be a matter of convenience for a consumer to bring in the 55-gallon tank. Perhaps if he had a second empty tank, he drops one off, picks the other up, that might be helpful. I think this board would like to take the position, we'd like to be helpful if we can, and as long as it doesn't violate the law. But as far as what I'm hearing, you don't have an objection at Hambro WSG.
I'll ask our operations guy, Joel, do you have anything to add, or no? No? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Not to put you on the spot, Mr. Sparrow, is there anything you'd like to add to this conversation at all? Okay,
You
thank
guys
you.
already do this? Okay.
Okay, then we'll bring it back to any additional public comments on this. Okay, seeing no public comments additional, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
I don't know, it's pretty straightforward. If he offers the service, I guess the only thing we'd want to do is make sure maybe we include it in our educational material we put out to the public and let them know the service is available. Otherwise, I don't see taking an action besides including it in our public relations side of it to let them know the service is available, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Any other,
I agree with Mr. Sullivan. If it already exists, let's use what exists.
it exists through Recology, is that what I'm hearing here? So Recology will continue to do this at its own cost. I'm just trying to find out if we can offer a better service to our people here in our community who are
Do you
using the
guys charge
service.
to use it? I'm sorry, I'm giving. I wanted you to get up and show off your Rotary shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Tommy Sparrow with Recology. We do provide the service. It is as stated, customers do call, we make appointments. Prior to accepting the oil, we sniff it, make sure it's not contaminated. If it is, it goes right back to them. It's logged, it's manifest, and it's hauled out. No cost to the customer, no revenue to me.
Okay. I'm good with that, unless we're.
And the program is the same at the transfer station, you know, you've actually got two programs here. And
Okay, well, I'm getting conflicting information. The program limits is 15 gallons at the transfer station.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not 55, it's 15. And it's in 5-gallon increments. So there's a difference here. Recology offers the 55-gallon drum. What we're trying to do is see if there's a board consensus to allow someone in our community to bring his 55-gallon tank into the transfer station. So I'm hearing...
We have a location that's going to do it for free to them. I'm not sure what, unless we're going to pay the person to bring in the oil, I don't know what additional service we'd be offering there.
Well, I think there's no cost at either site. It just is the policy at the Solid Waste Authority is 15 gallons, not 55. Is that correct, Ted? It's 15 gallons.
That is correct, because the standard is without calling ahead for appointments, one has to bring it in 5-gallon containers at maximum, and one can bring up to 20 gallons over the roads, and we suggest that it's 15, but in all honesty, if somebody brings in 20 gallons or fewer, we take it. There is additional cost to offer this service in that if it was something that Hambro Waste Solutions Group was expected to do, then it would have to be a change order so that we specify what they would be expected to do, and we would have to update our permit documents related to the transfer station. So There are additional costs, and as I said, there is also the potential additional spill liability, and so we would want to make sure that we addressed all of those issues.
But my question then would be, even if someone makes prior arrangements with the authority, they may not bring a 55-gallon tank of used motor oil to the transfer station.
That is correct. If somebody called and says, I have a 55-gallon drum of oil that I would very much like to recycle today, I would say, okay, you need to call Recology, and here's their number, and by appointment, they can take that.
Okay. All right, so we're clear on this, whether this authority wishes to standardize the service between the two, Recology and/or the Solid Waste Authority via Hambro WSG, that 55-gallon tanks would be acceptable at either site with prior notification. So that would be...
I sincerely do not recommend this course of action.
No, I know that's not what you're not recommending. What we're trying to do is see if there's a consensus to change the policy on accepting with prior knowledge, prior notification, a 55-gallon tank at the transfer station. And that's what we're trying to determine here. If there is, okay.
I guess
Go
I'm
ahead,
confused because
Mr.
we're going to be talking about additional costs to the authority to get this thing up
Mm-hmm.
and going, and then we've still got additional problems in the process, and there's already a free service there. The thing that we probably need to do is make it a policy of the authority that at the phone, if the question on the other line is, I have $55-gallon tank, where do I take it? Go to Recology, here's their number, and
No,
I think that's...
here's their number.
Yeah.
Start with here's the number. Don't go there and then give the number, just, here's the number.
All right. Do we have any, we've given two commissioners the opportunity to speak one way. Is there any reason to change that policy at this time, to change the policy and allow the 55-gallon tanks with prior notification at the transfer station?
I don't think so, because if you take them to the transfer station, they have to have a forklift there, you have to have the equipment, you have a place to store it. Tommy's already set up to take it, and Wes and Hambro's already taking care of all that, so just leave it the way it is.
Okay, then there's no action on this, I'm hearing. Okay, then we will move on. 7.6. Excuse me, 7.7, discussion, possible action regarding authority support for the City of Crescent City's annual Clean Sweep Collection Program. Ted?
I included this separately on the agenda, mostly to highlight that it is something that we have regularly supported in the past, and that we would recommend continuing to support. We share the advertisement costs, and as Hambro has agreed to waive their portion of the fees to receive the green materials collected during this event, we would also recommend that we waive our portion of the fees. And the event is organized by the City of Crescent City. It's just for Crescent City residents. But Tuesday, May 27th, south of 9th Street, the city crews will collect separate piles of grass and leaves, and separated from trees, limbs, and brush, with no large tree limbs more than 6 foot in length or 4 inches in diameter. Piles must be 6 foot in or smaller in size, and you can have more than one pile. On Wednesday, May 28th, 9th Street North is when the city will be doing the collections. Anyway, it's a fine program, and we're delighted to support it.
I think I'd be inclined to do it if the city agreed to actually trim their trees they have downtown. That would be my inclination there.
All right, no trash involved here.
Absolutely no trash as far as this service, and there is sometimes some confusion between the spring cleanup program that Recology offers to their collection customers and this program, which is offered to all city residents, whether or not they're a Recology customer.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, before we move on, any public comments on this? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll bring it back to the board. 7.7, any additional discussion on the board? Karen, if you would, call the vote.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, and item 7.8, receive, post, then file final report assessment of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority by R3 Consulting Group. Ted?
We received this on Friday, which was the same day that we were publishing and distributing the agenda, so this agenda item is simply to receive and post this. We do have a separate web page for the assessment, and I've not yet posted it to that web page, but I would be delighted to do so after the board directs me to do so. And also, if the board would care to discuss how you would, what you would like on subsequent agendas regarding this report and how we might agendize that, I would welcome that advice.
Public comments on receive, post, and file the final report assessment of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority by R3. Any public comments at this time? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll close public comments. We'll bring it back to the board for the future discussion, I'm presuming at the June 11th meeting, or is that the 12th? Excuse me, it's the Wednesday the 12th?
June 11th.
June 11th, June 11th. Commissioners?
You know, the only thing I would request that, Mr. Chair, you set a strategic planning session so we can get forward. That was a recommendation that came out of the report as to what direction we want as an authority board to follow with, I mean, it's going to fit whatever alternative we go with, but I think the main thing was my point of viewing as solid waste as a utility, not a social change agent. And I've been pretty public about that, my opinion on that. So I'd like to get into a strategic goals session, get it done, and then we can go forward with one of the recommendations.
So your recommendation, as we have discussed, is to set up a special meeting to discuss the options, and schedule it per everyone's schedule here, which seems to be quite a trying, challenging experience sometime trying to get all 5 of us together. But we'll make an attempt to do that, and I am suggesting that you want to have this before the next general meeting.
No.
Make it the next general meeting.
Right after that.
Okay. All right. So as far as June 11th is concerned, is it the consensus of this board to post this item for discussion on the R3 report, or what is the board's wish? What is the authority's wish on this point? I'll go with consensus.
I'm in favor of posting it.
Okay. All right, so moved to, let's, you have a motion on there. Was that a motion, Mr. Sol?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Mr. Gastineau, okay. All right, any further board discussion? Or we'll take a vote. It's to receive, post, and file the final report assessment.
Oh, we're going to file it, but we can file it.
Well, receive, post, and file the final, that's your recommendation, Ted?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and that we actually vote on the acceptance of it at the next meeting, I guess, because this isn't to take action on it due to the time frame. So I would receive, post, and put it on the next agenda for possible acceptance.
This board can take no action on this at this time. We don't have to do anything at this time.
If the board is concerned about accepting the report, now I had presumed that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this was receiving the final report because this report was revised based on comments received regarding the draft. And earlier in this agenda, the board has already approved payment of the final invoice for R3.
That is
So
correct.
if there's the possibility that the board is not going to accept this report, then I would recommend not making that final payment, because once you make that final payment, the contract's essentially done. And if the board wants any further action from R3, then there would be an additional cost.
Well, I guess mine would be a technical question then, since we already voted to pay them at the beginning of the meeting, and the action item listed on the agenda says nothing about accepting, it just says receive, post, and file. So I don't know if that's just a semantics, play on words, but legally, don't we have to have it listed as an action item to accept the report or not? That would be a question for council.
I don't know that it makes a big difference whether you say accept or receive. This is what we've paid for, is this report. Now, if there's some reason that we think it's deficient, then.
Well, then I'll accept, I'll change my motion to accept and post the report by R3.
Mr. Gastineau, will you change your second to reflect that?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion, Karen, will be to accept and post the final report final report assessment of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority by R3 Consulting. That is what the motion states. We have a motion and we have a second. Okay, any further board discussion? Okay, Karen, if you would, call the vote.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gastineau?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, we do not have closed session today, and then we have any further comments at this point? At this point, we'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you.